Welcome in, everyone, and thank you for listening to the 91st ever episode of the Missouri Sports Podcast, brought to you by 106 Apparel and recording from the Revel Advertising Studio here in beautiful Springfield, Missouri. I'm one of your hosts, Cameron Albert, alongside my good friend and fellow Mizzou fan, Kyle DeVries. How are you doing today, Kyle?
I'm doing great, Cameron. My voice just cracked, but that doesn't stop me from being great. As you are well aware, I have been working from home, so I've been home a lot. And a couple nights ago, I was telling you guys about this. My dog got sprayed by a skunk, and we didn't really. It just kind of happened really fast, and the dog came back in the house after it happened, and so the house has been really stinky recently. My dog's been really stinky, and it feels really good to just get out of the house because this is pretty much the first time it's happened since that happened like 2 days ago. Yeah. Hopefully, I'm not stinking up the studio.
I'll be honest, I don't smell any skunk on you.
That's great, but it's good to get it's good to get out of the house.
Yeah.
But how are you?
I'm doing well. I've been out of the house pretty regularly, so but that's one of the many reasons I don't have a dog, and there I just alienated 70% of the audience.
Yeah, when I let her outside last night, I had like a little bit of PTSD. I'm not gonna lie, and so did she. She actually was like craning her head, like craning her neck at me and looking outside. And I had to go out there with her, and I was looking around in every dark corner of the yard. I was like, we are not going through this again.
Yeah, skunks are nasty creatures, and yeah, they'll cause some damage, and they will cause some skittishness on the part of household pets.
For sure.
Let's see here. What are we going to talk about this week? We have some news items, and then we are going to do a fun little segment where we talk about what could have been or would have been the football spring game 2020. Obviously, it was canceled, and we're going to look at Appalachian State's spring game from last year, the last few Missouri Tigers spring games under Barry Odom, and what we think we would have been looking for, what we think might have happened, and what maybe our reactions would have been had it occurred. So a little bit of hypothetical imagination time, but should be fun and interesting, and it'll give us a reason to talk some football. It's been a while since we talked football.
For sure. And I'm wearing my my Drink Up t-shirt from 573 Tees. Shout out to them.
Not a sponsorship.
Not
just
a
like
sponsorship,
the shirt.
But I love the shirt, and I love Coach Drinkwitz, and we're talking about some football, so it seemed like a great occasion to break it out.
And you got that State of Missouri outline on there,
yeah,
which obviously we love. I got my Missouri Sports Podcast shirt, State outline.
There you go.
Best State outline out there, I would say.
I have to agree.
Yeah.
Nice logo.
Oh,
Cameron,
yeah.
Producer Cameron.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
You can find them on the shop. Don't remember the URL, but we've got it out there somewhere.
We've got it.
You can buy one of our shirts.
Yep.
And you can buy one like Kyle has.
Absolutely.
From them. Let's see here. What kind of news are we going to talk about? Kyle, let's start with football, then go basketball, then we'll be back into football for the spring game stuff. Football, we have a gentleman named Dalen Carnell who has been, creating some buzz on Twitter because his 24/7 Sports crystal ball predictions have been trending towards Missouri. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is a big deal. This is a very highly ranked recruit, a 4-star cornerback from Indianapolis, and this would be a huge get for Missouri. And when the crystal balls start trending towards a certain direction, it's usually a pretty strong indicator that the movement is happening or there's been a commitment made. Just pending an announcement or something like that.
Word's gotten out about something.
Yes, and a lot of times we don't really know what that is, but when multiple experts start making their picks for a certain player, there's usually a reason for that. And we are kind of looking at some of the it gives like some statistics for individual experts and how much they're right, and a lot of them are in like the upper 90s of how the percentages for how correct they are.
Mm-hmm.
So that's definitely a good thing. Missouri's done really well recruiting defensive backs lately with Ennis Rakestraw. Obviously, that was a massive commitment. So hopefully that pays dividends in the long run.
Yeah, I was looking at the 24/7 crystal ball situation, and maybe this is a new feature that I haven't seen before, but they've got Missouri at 100%, and then they have an 8 next to it, and it says high. So I don't know if that's, I'm trying to find more information.
Like a confidence rating?
Yeah. Oh, actually, it absolutely is. The individual predictors have a confidence rating. They are 7, 8, and 8, which the website just kind of mashed together into an 8.
Mm-hmm. I think I think the guy that said a 7 is the Notre Dame Rivals guy or 247 guy, because he's from Indianapolis. And then the other ones I think are kind of just like general Midwest experts. But it would be great to see a commitment from him soon. I know that I think Travion Ford and Taj Butts, a couple of those guys, we saw Crystal Ball kind of trend in Missouri's favor there, and then within like a week or two, they were announcing their commitment. So it's a big deal.
Some other, let me go back to his profile. Some other offers that he holds are from Purdue, West Virginia, Central Michigan, Cincinnati, Duke, Indiana, Iowa, Michigan State, Nebraska, Washington State, and like you alluded to earlier, Notre Dame. So plenty of high-quality offers there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of those schools are, similar programs to Missouri, kind of in the same level of prestige as Missouri. And I think especially with kind of the momentum we have right now, we should be beating out a lot of those schools for recruits often. So
especially Nebraska.
And that's not always the case. So it's good to see that.
Yeah, the recruiting momentum in football just doesn't act like it wants to stop.
Mm-hmm.
There was one player recently that ended up committing to Minnesota after having Missouri in their Final Five, but I mean that's been kind of a one-off now compared to everybody else that has trimmed their list, and that seems like Missouri has been really in on. They've been seemingly getting their guys, and when we have a situation like that, we don't really dwell on it. Like I don't even remember the kid's name. They ended up going to Minnesota because it was just like, well, we can't get them all.
Right. And I mean, when you think about what can Missouri do to improve their recruiting, or what would we imagine as kind of a best case scenario for Missouri, I would say they're pretty much doing that this year. When I think of a coach coming in and shutting down the borders, getting the best talent in Missouri, other than the number one ranked player who's going to Ohio State, and we've talked about how sometimes that's just unavoidable. For the most part, we're locking down the top talent in the state and getting some top players from other states as well. So, and the class isn't finished, but so far it really looks like we're kind of following a blueprint as what we would probably design as best case scenario.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would call it like a realistic best case scenario. Yeah,
there you go.
We like to be realistic on this podcast.
We do.
Rational. Was that the main? Was there any other football news this week? I feel like that was,
as far as like recruiting goes, I think that was really the main thing.
Yeah. All right, so we got some basketball news. Started off with next year's schedule news. Missouri will host Bradley at Mizzou Arena on November 29th. So Missouri Valley Conference. Somebody on Twitter nicknamed it the first inaugural Ronnie Suggs Invitational or something like that. So,
yeah, that's where he came from, right? He came from Bradley, went to Southern Illinois or something.
Another Missouri Valley school.
Yeah, I think we've talked about that actually. But, we actually watched Missouri State play Bradley last year, and Bradley walked out of JQH with a win. We hope that does not happen next season in Mizzou Arena. But, with the way Missouri's played the last couple of years, who knows? Bradley is a good Missouri Valley opponent, good mid-major team that's kind of on the up and up right now.
They've been to the NCAA tournament more recently than Missouri has.
They have. I think they were a 15 seed like 2 seasons ago, which I think was a little bit ridiculous, and ended up giving the 2 seed a pretty good fight. I think
Michigan State.
Yeah. So that's a game Missouri should win, but definitely not going to be a super easy one.
That non-conference schedule, I think we've talked about it before, but it absolutely terrifies me.
Mm-hmm.
It's maybe set up so that Missouri can win. They can lose a few games and then still be in the tournament conversation, but also, man, just some tough opponents, some tough environments. Yeah,
it's definitely super high on the entertainment value potentially,
unless it's an absolute flop.
But it's very, as far as tournament chances go, it's very high risk, high reward, because like you said, we definitely don't have to win them all to still stay in that conversation, but we definitely can't just lose them all, and which is absolutely something that's in the realm of possibility, that Missouri could just lose all of those big games. They're really
every single game,
all toss up matchups in that kind of interesting non-conference slate we've talked about.
Yeah, it's going to be, I don't know, it's going to be so interesting when we get to that point and you're like, we've talked about kind of the concerns we have about the basketball team and their outlook for next season. And, there's just nothing really, reassuring me that it's going to be a successful non-conference season. There's just enough cupcakes to where it won't be a complete disaster record-wise, but we also saw last year what can happen when you underestimate an opponent.
Yeah, we did.
Continuing on with basketball, let's talk recruiting. A gentleman by the name of Caesar Edwards. A 6'10" forward out of South Carolina received a Mizzou offer. He's ranked 143rd, according to 24/7 Sports, in the class of 2021. Holds other offers from Clemson, Florida, South Carolina, and Xavier.
You may have already said this, but he's like a 6'9" forward. Did you already say that?
I said 6'10".
6'10".
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so you already described his measurables, but
sure.
Forward. I watched his film today, and I gotta say, of all the guys we've talked about in the last week or two, this guy might be my favorite as far as just a realistic target that I think Missouri has a shot at. And he's got some good offers, like you mentioned. He's from South Carolina, so he has a lot of those kind of SEC offers, but this guy can really play. He's super versatile for how tall and big he is. But kind of his highlight film, at least the one I watched, kind of laid out in categories, like certain things he can do. Like he can shoot, he can rebound really well, and he can defend. He's athletic. He has just a beautiful shot for his size, especially. So I really would like to see Missouri make this guy a priority. I don't know how good of a shot they have at landing him, but it would be really cool to see this guy in a Missouri uniform, in my opinion.
That marks the 25th official scholarship offer that's been documented to this point. So I don't think we're going to see, a ton more offers go out for the 2021 class based on how the staff has operated in previous seasons, but a handful probably still yet to go. But I think the 2021 class, as far as who Missouri's really going after, is starting to take shape in the form where we can just keep track of the same names and we won't be adding too many more as we go forward. Missouri has reached out to, and I think had a virtual meeting via Zoom or something with Sean Duru-Gordon, I guess. And he is a 6'7" forward from New York, class of 2021, unranked. But as we said last week, if you are a 6'7" forward, you will probably get a Mizzou offer before too long.
Yeah, I've seen some reports that Missouri's been talking to this guy for a while. Does he have an official offer?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But it's only a matter of time.
Either way, yeah, I think he's going to get one soon. I watched some film on him, and he seems like an interesting prospect. And to me, watching his film, he does not match his recruiting rankings. He's pretty under the radar right now. But I think he may, I don't know about blow up, but I think he'll definitely pick up some momentum before it's all kind of said and done. But definitely a very athletic guy, super long and rangy, blocking shots and getting up for rebounds, and just was kind of doing it all actually in his film. So just looked like he played hard all the time. So, and obviously it's a highlight tape. So
yeah, only Power 5 offer I see according to 24/7 Sports is Penn State.
Yeah,
for him.
So that will be definitely a name to keep an eye on, though, because I think, like you said, I think he'll get an offer soon.
And just general NCAA news, the recruiting dead period has been extended. Do you remember the date on that?
It was June 30th?
Yeah, something like that.
Was it end of June?
Yeah. So remind me what that actually means in practicality. You just no in-home visits, nobody coming to campus.
I think it just basically means no physical meetings,
Okay.
but they'll just continue probably what they've been doing the last couple of months, just Zoom calls and all that stuff.
So it shouldn't really hinder any offers going out, but I was wondering if maybe the coaching staff, specifically with basketball, would maybe hold out until they were able to maybe go see some games in person once that starts back up. But at some point, you kind of have to act as if that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think there probably aren't very many schools that are just like waiting for better conditions. So if you wait for a little while, you're just going to be behind, which is unfortunate for everybody. You know, you may be making offers to people you never watched play before, so which is kind of a big deal. But yeah, in this in these conditions, you probably just can't wait.
Yeah. I think that's all I have for news before we talk about the spring game that wasn't.
Yeah.
Ready to dive into that?
I'm ready.
All right. Where should we start here? Perhaps with Appalachian State's spring game last year, Missouri's last few spring games.
Yeah, we can talk about Appalachian State. I thought it was interesting to kind of look and see what they did last year when Coach Drinkets was there, because obviously everybody does spring games differently. You know, sometimes they do kind of a 1-versus-1, like the one offense versus the one defense, or there's a dozen different scenarios that teams have done in the past. But so I kind of, maybe that might give us a little insight into what we might have seen if Missouri played a spring game.
Yeah, really just so disappointing that new coach, first season, and you're just not getting that access that we thought we were going to get. We're not seeing, a spring depth chart.
Yeah.
Just not hearing reports out of practices or anything like that. It's just, it just leaves so much up in the air it would do that for any coach, but it being a first-year coach, with only one year of head coaching experience, it's just, I don't know, it adds that much more to it.
Yeah, I'll preface the entire conversation, too, by saying sometimes you can't exactly put a ton of stock in the spring game, but with a new coach, definitely I think there were things that we could have learned in the spring game that we don't know still.
Yeah, absolutely. So I thought it was interesting to note that at Appalachian State last year, Coach Drinkwitz had the first-team offense go head-to-head with the first-team defense. And this article that I found on the football team's official website just refers to it as the final spring scrimmage. It doesn't seem like they quite hype it up quite as much as Missouri and the rest of the SEC does. But yeah, the ones all went against each other. And it looks like the starters were given enough room to make a few plays early on. Their quarterback, Zach Thomas, had a 25-yard touchdown to one of their top wide receivers. And it just seemed like the first-team offense for Appalachian State last year kind of worked the first-team defense. And normally you see that in the Mizzou spring game because the first-team offense is going against the second-team defense. And so, I don't know, just kind of interesting. I guess Missouri's been doing it that way for a while now, so it would have just been really fascinating to see the first-team offense go up against the best defensive players on the squad.
Right, and I don't really know why you don't do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was definitely an indicator of what was to come for Appalachian State last year. I mean, they had a great offense, had some really potent offensive weapons for sure. I guess one is now on an NFL roster. But some things you kind of, maybe individual performances you kind of take with a grain of salt, but maybe the whole team's performance as a whole or as a unit can definitely be true indicators.
Yeah, and according to this article, the running game found its groove early as well. They had a star running back named Darrington Evans, who had a touchdown early on, and then their backup quarterbacks came in. It seems like they didn't really do much through the air, but they were able to scramble a little bit, which actually reminded me of Missouri spring game last year with Lindsey Scott Jr. and Sean Robinson not really showing much through the air, but getting out of the pocket a few times and making a couple plays. But it's when you get out of the pocket in the spring game when you're not allowed to be tackled, you can't really.
It's a little bit different.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Let's see here. it looks like once Appalachian State went deeper into the depth chart, the offense still kind of carried the day. I thought it was interesting that a kid named Jalen Virgil had a 60-yard touchdown run, but then ended up only having 34 touches on the season. 24 of those were receptions, only 10 rushes. So that kind of speaks to your point about, players that show up and make big plays in the spring game. That doesn't always translate to, what happens in the regular season.
Yeah, I actually mentioned this to you before we started recording, and it's about Missouri, not necessarily Appalachian State, but I remember, in the 2015, 2016 years, if you guys probably remember Marvin Sanders, who was a backup quarterback, and I'm not sure if he really ever saw much actual game time, but he was like the darling of every spring game, whenever he was at Missouri, because he was a great athlete. He would always break some long run in the spring game against the second or third team defense or something like that.
Yeah, I remember him running around in that green number 2 jersey.
Yeah, he would do it. He did it multiple years where he would have a huge spring game, but unfortunately never saw the field. But
yeah, he was behind Drew Lock on the depth chart at quarterback.
Right.
And even though there was a time when people were calling for the Marvin Sanders show instead of Drew Lock, when Lock struggled a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then I think, I watched a little bit of Missouri's 2018 spring game, and Harry Ballard III had a huge touchdown catch, and I don't think I ever saw the field for Missouri either. So just a lot of individual performances like that, especially later in the game, but that's kind of what it's for.
Yeah. But overall, the starters for Appalachian State kind of manhandled the first team defense. And like I said, that kind of spoke to how their offense was pretty electric all season. And the second team defense actually did better than the first team or the second team offense later in the game. So I don't know if maybe that's a sign of things to come as far as the depth on the defensive side of the ball for Appalachian State. I just wish, the more I think about it, I just wish we could have seen, you see some fun little things in the spring game. Last year, they had a sideline interview with Kelly Bryant, which was pretty unique. The SEC network being there and broadcasting the spring game, it just is that first little taste of the team sort of, on the big stage. There's fans in attendance usually, and there's articles that get written about it.
And I think they interviewed Drew Lock last year too. I think he was there for the game.
Right. Last year, one thing that I noticed when I looked through the stats of Missouri's spring game was Barrett Bannister had 73 yards receiving and was kind of all over the place.
Yeah,
and
he was kind of Kelly Bryant's go-to in the spring game.
And then that never really materialized in the regular season until some depth issues later in the season. So I think he's a guy that I would have actually looked at as maybe having another pretty big spring game, but potentially parlaying that into more of a starring role in the offense in the regular season.
Yeah, we have a lot of guys at wide receiver that have kind of shown flashes, and there's definitely going to be opportunity in the season this year, but it would have been interesting to see who kind of stepped up in the spring game. And obviously Barrett Bannister was running with the ones last year, so I assume that there's a good chance he would have been this year too. I think we potentially would have, I'm just kind of all over the place here, but just throwing out thoughts. We probably would have gotten our first look at Damon Hazelton too. Speaking of wide receivers,
yeah, absolutely.
He's kind of like the one guy I think of as a surefire number one wide receiver, or playing, or starting, I guess. So it would have been cool to see a first look at him.
Yeah, continuing with wide receivers, do you think we would have noticed the absence of Cam Scott?
I don't know. He was an interesting guy over the last couple of years. He would kind of disappear for a little while and then just have some massive game-changing play where he would break, a 60-yard touchdown or something like that. He was kind of a all-or-nothing guy in a way where, if he touched the ball, there's a good chance he was gone. But then sometimes he would just not record a stat for, long periods of time.
And that's not uncommon for young wide receivers. It would have been interesting to see him mature in the program, but alas, he's in the transfer portal.
Definitely was disappointed to hear that he was transferring because he was very talented.
Yeah. Remembering back to last year, in a similar situation as Damon Hazelton. Hazelton had a much brighter career at Virginia Tech than Jonathan Nance did at Arkansas, but he was a graduate transfer wide receiver who was going to come in and have an immediate role in the offense because of the lack of proven playmakers at wide receiver. And he was a pretty steady part of the offense all season and didn't ever really do anything too spectacular, but just kind of was like, a steady contributor. Mm-hmm. And honestly, if we get just that from Damon Hazelton, that's like, I think the floor for him this season.
If he's healthy, I think that's the floor for sure. What Nance did last year. Nance had like a couple big plays. I know I think he had a big touchdown against Wyoming that kind of got us back in that game. But that's for some reason the one that comes to mind. I know he had other big plays, but he was kind of there. But definitely if we could get Damon Hazelton to at least reproduce that and maybe a little bit more, would be great.
I think we definitely need to talk about the quarterback battle and what that would have looked like in the spring game. Do you think Connor Bazelak plays?
No, I don't think he would have played. I think his rehab's going well, but there's no reason to play him in this game whenever his rehab just probably isn't quite complete, and there's a very good chance he could be the starter when it come in the fall. I don't think he will be the starter, even if he's 90 to 100% healthy. I think Sean Robinson's probably going to win that job, but that would have been our first real look at Robinson running with the ones, and just as interestingly, what we would have seen with the backups. Because there's only really 3 healthy quarterbacks on the roster, and does Sean Robinson play for a third of the game? And the other 2 are Taylor Powell and Brady Cook, who's been in the program for like 2 months. He's a true freshman that joined in the spring semester, so very little experience there. So it would have been very intriguing to see like kind of the disbursement of I was about to say minutes, but you know what I mean, of snaps. Plays, of snaps.
Yeah. I've got kind of a theory and maybe a mildly hot take regarding the quarterbacks if there had been a spring game. I'm pretty confident that when we would be reacting to that spring game, I think we would be thinking and saying, man, I hope Connor Bazelak is healthy and can be the starter at the beginning of the season. I went back and watched some tape of Sean Robinson last year in the spring game, as well as his time at TCU. Now, as a sophomore at TCU, he was injured. That definitely impacted his play. But I just am seeing a lot of second half of the season Kelly Bryant when I watch Sean Robinson. And I don't think there would have been anything in the spring game that would have given us much confidence in the 3 quarterbacks, because Taylor Powell, we know his limitations. Brady Cook would have looked like a freshman, and I think we would be going, Connor Bazelak's got to be the guy, and we got to hope that he's healthy for the season.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know. Assuming Bazelak does not play in this game, like I genuinely don't even know what you do, because Cook is, does he even know the plays? Like, are you even going to play him very much? And do you put your potential starter in for half the game? I don't know, but I think that's reasonable. Sean Robinson didn't, light things on fire at TCU. He didn't play very well in the spring game when he played last year, but he was pretty new to the program at that time. But I think that he can be good in Drinkwood's offense. I think that it could potentially cater to the kind of player that he is, but I think if I had to choose whether between him and a 100% healthy Connor Bazelak, I'm with you. Mm-hmm. I think Connor Bazelak's very talented. He played very well against Arkansas whenever he did play last year, and I think that it's expected that he is kind of the guy for the future. I don't know about this season, but definitely if he's 100% healthy, this is definitely a legitimate quarterback battle, and I think that I would personally think I'd like to see him get the majority of snaps.
So that kind of brings up another interesting conundrum with the quarterback position is if Sean Robinson and Connor Bazelak kind of have this competition this year, there's the fact that Sean Robinson has another year of eligibility after this. And there's something to be said for letting a quarterback with 4 years of eligibility just kind of figure it out along the way. If you have that kind of time as a coaching staff or as a program to invest in a kid, and then you're looking at maybe a spectacular junior and senior seasons from him, the timing of it with Sean Robinson having 2 years of eligibility, I don't know if they would, even if he is the starter this upcoming season, I got to think there would be another quarterback battle the following season.
Mm-hmm.
And then what do you do with a senior Sean Robinson and a kid in Bazelak who you potentially want to be the 3-year starter at that point?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It just...
Yeah, it's something that we haven't had to think about for a while. And I agree that, if you've got a freshman quarterback who is very talented and is probably as good or better as the guy you are going to have for 2 years, like Sean Robinson, yeah, you play the freshman and let him figure it out and just hope that he really progresses and becomes a great player in the SEC, his sophomore, junior, senior year. And we saw that with Drew Lock. He had to play his freshman year. They kind of threw him in the fire, but they didn't really have a lot of other choice. We knew he was really talented, and he really struggled that freshman year. And, it depends on the situation, but that could probably be a bad thing if he gets thrown into the fire, doesn't play well, gets in his head. And I think there was a period of time where we felt like that could happen with Drew Lock, and I think he even felt like that was happening. But he really bounced back and obviously had a tremendous career at Missouri. But I think I agree with you that, if you've got a guy that's super talented and you've got that time where he can play for 3 or 4 years, you just put him in there and let him figure it out and give him the experience.
Yeah.
Unless maybe you really, really feel like the rest of your team is really primed for a really good year, like next year.
Mm-hmm.
Do you play the guy who's a little bit more experienced and 100% healthy and just kind of restart next year with the freshman quarterback?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to think about there. I just think with Sean Robinson, we're not gonna see the pure quarterback skills that make you think, wow, this guy can lead the team to something special. And not that necessarily we should be looking for or expecting that next season, because it is first year under a new coach. Some aspect of rebuilding is natural in that situation, but I don't feel like it's a talentless roster. So you still... All right, folks, we're back. We had a little technical difficulty there. Blame producer Cameron.
No.
Just kidding. It was all of our combined faults.
No.
It was nobody's fault. It was just a simple thing that happens sometimes. Anyway, we were talking about quarterbacks. And I was saying, I don't think Sean Robinson is going to display the pure quarterback skills that you saw from the type of Drew Lock, just really slinging the ball around into tight spaces, leading receivers, all that jazz. And the reason I'm thinking that is because his throwing motion was that of Kelly Bryant. Very similar, very slow throwing motion, brings the ball down, brings it all the way around. And I just think unless he's improved the mechanics a bit and looked markedly improved in the spring game in 2020, I think the fan base would be potentially freaking out a little bit about the quarterback play leading up to the season.
I do have to agree that our transition from Drew Lock to Kelly Bryant was fairly jarring, as far as just like the quick release, just the arm, I'll say it, the arm talent that Drew Lock displayed was far superior to that of Kelly Bryant, and it was very obvious. We were kind of just like, we were used to that. We watched Drew Lock play for 4 seasons, you know. So, Kelly Bryant at certain times in the season played very well, but as far as just purely his throwing mechanic, yes, it's a little ugly comparatively to Drew Lock's, which is not ugly.
Right.
So,
but Drew Lock, I mean, you're talking about like almost technically perfect throwing motion.
Yeah, we're talking about a guy who could be like an NFL star here in the next few years.
Right.
So it's hard to be compared to that, but it was jarring. To I guess react to what you said. I'm not sure that anything you said is really a super hot take. Sean Robinson is definitely a little bit unproven. I can't remember if this happened before or after our technical difficulty, but he did not just light the world on fire at TCU. So there was a reason he probably transferred. So, but I do think that there's talent there. There's potential there. I haven't really watched him enough to know what I really think about him as far as his throwing motion and all that stuff. And we'll probably dive into that as we get closer to the season. But I guess all in all, I think we both probably are rooting for a Connor Bazelak return, and he may not really start the season, but I think the second half of the season, hopefully we're seeing Bazelak get at least, I don't know, several snaps a game.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that long ago that Drew Lock would get a drive. At the beginning of his freshman year, Matty Mock was still the starter. Drew Lock would get a drive. Matty Mock would get a drive when James Franklin was the quarterback. So that's not unheard of, even at Missouri specifically. I just think that had the spring game been played, I absolutely 100% hope I'm wrong. I hope that that Robinson would have looked amazing and we'd have no doubts about him being the starter going into the season. I just don't think that's what would have happened if the spring game had been played. On the flip side, I think we would have been incredibly excited about the running backs like we have been the last couple seasons. We all know about your affinity for one Mr. Tyler Beatty, and I think he and Larry Roundtree and Semi Bakari and some of the other running back depth would have looked really good. Maybe not quite as good as they usually look in Mizzou spring games playing against the second team defense. Playing against the first team defense, maybe it wouldn't have looked quite as spectacular, but I still think once we got into the running back depth against the defensive depth, then we would have seen some pretty big runs, and we would have been, like we have been the last couple of years, pretty excited about the running backs.
Oh man, just talking about Tyler Beatty puts me in a good mood, fellas. In all seriousness though, I have to say, I think Tyler Beatty has a great shot to be kind of the X factor of this offense. And like the way his style of play fits with, I think, a Coach Drinkwitz's offense. I haven't really studied, Appalachian State offense, but I definitely don't think there's going to be quite as much kind of line it up and run north and south as a Barry Odom offense. And as we just saw the last few years, which really kind of catered to Larry Roundtree. And I still think Larry Roundtree will still be a huge part of the season, but I would not be surprised if we see Tyler Beatty get more snaps than Roundtree this year. And I don't know how drastic of a change we'll see in the offensive style from last year to this year, or this upcoming year, but it really wouldn't shock me. And I know I love Tyler Beatty, but I really think that he's primed to have a massive year.
So leading rusher for Appalachian State last year was Darrington Evans. 255 rushing attempts, which is a lot. Only 21 receptions for about 200 yards and 5 touchdowns. So, maybe not. And then another running back with 113 rushes had just 1 reception. So maybe, Evans was more of just pure running back and kind of had to adapt to some of the play calling. And if that's the case, then you're looking at a player in Tyler Beatty who is built for that type of offense, more or less. And yeah, I think could be that, really shine as the dual threat that we know he can be under the right circumstances. Who do you think is there any one player besides Roundtree and Beatty that you think would have really shown us something that would make us, I feel like there's always a third running back that we're like, oh, watch out for them. They're that's going to be the one that gets snaps as the third running back. And then based on the spring game, and then it doesn't always work out that way when the season actually rolls around.
Yeah. When the season rolls around, that's when the best players play. And so sometimes, there's guys on the roster you like, that just don't see as much, playing time. But that's a good question. I think I'd like to see what the tight ends would have looked like in the spring game. Obviously, Daniel Parker Jr. has had an issue with his eye. I don't think he would have played. Who starts at tight end? I'd like to see Messiah Swinson back in action because I know he tore his ACL and he was a pretty big recruit at the time of him coming in. So I think I'd like to see a healthy Swinson and who am I missing? Christofferson,
Brendan Scales.
I feel like I'm missing somebody else still, but
Nico Hay.
Yeah, there we go. I think that Nico Hay and Messiah Swinson are probably the two guys that get the most run at tight end with Daniel Parker Jr. out in the spring game. So it would have been kind of interesting to see how they were used, where they lined up, if they played kind of an H-back at all in any of those formations, or if they're going out wide or running routes or blocking. What kind of the balance of how they're used would have been interesting to watch.
One thing that I wanted to ask you specifically about the running backs is, do you think Elijah Young has an opportunity to see some playing time and maybe even burn a red shirt as a true freshman?
I don't know. Burning the red shirt, it's just, to me, it always seems like a little bit wasteful whenever a guy's truly doesn't have to have a role. Whenever there's, definitely
when you're the third running back,
or whenever you're the third or maybe even the fourth running back, is it really necessary for them to burn the red shirt? And I know we're talking about guys and their actual lives here, and just because I'm thinking of them as a football player and it would be nice to have them for 5 years.
You're thinking of them in terms of years of eligibility.
Yes. Yeah. I'm almost like I'm doing the GM role on a video game.
Right.
I'm not thinking about them as a human, which probably I should, and maybe the coaches are. But I think there's a lot of players like that kind of burn their red shirt just playing on special teams, and I always kind of wonder if that's necessary. But I think he definitely will get to play quite a bit this year, and I'm really not sure though on the red shirt though. I kind of hope that he doesn't burn his shirt, but if he's carving out that meaningful of a role, then great, go for it.
Yeah, maybe significant snaps in exactly 4 games would be totally fine.
Yeah, that's kind of what they did with Bazelak. He played in several games and at least a little bit, and he played that one full game against Arkansas. That's pretty good experience for not having to use any eligibility at all.
Fantastic, I would say. We talked about the wide receivers quite a bit already. Just touched on the tight ends. There's not usually a ton to talk about on the offensive line coming out of the spring game. Other than maybe just, who gets the first team reps.
Yeah, hopefully no injuries or anything.
Exactly. On the defensive side of the ball, I think, I'm just going to go ahead and say it, we definitely would have seen a Nick Bolton interception. And it would have gotten us really jazzed about him and his prospects for the season.
Man.
And that would have been a big story everybody would have been talking about. Because tackles and sacks and stuff in the spring game are not quite as big of a deal because, they're being told to go down easily when they're tackled. Yeah,
I feel like we usually see a lot of interceptions and stuff because it's just like inexperienced guys playing. But Nick Bolton's so good. He's gonna easily be drafted next year, potentially a first round pick next year.
Which means realistically a 4th round pick.
Yeah, I agree. He would have destroyed everybody out there. He is definitely probably the surefire best player on the whole team. But it would have been interesting to probably see who they trotted out there for defensive line. We've got Chris Turner and Kobe Whiteside, and I don't really know who else is playing outside of that. Probably Jatori Hansford, probably. Yeah, I think Trey Williams might have a chance to start. But
Mikhail Byers.
Yeah, most likely I'm thinking that Chris Turner and Jatorian Hansford are probably the starting ends.
Yeah, I think one thing we would have been talking about is, a lot of guys returning on the defensive line, but not guys that really blow you away. Jordan Elliott was the guy on the defensive line that you could really write home about. And there's not, we've talked about how the recruiting, from a recruiting standpoint, there was nobody really coming in that was going to be much of an impact guy on the defensive line.
Right.
And so you're returning a lot of experience, but, kind of like how we talk about with the basketball team, when you're returning a lot of players that didn't really blow you away the previous season.
Experience isn't always a good thing.
Can you get that excited about it?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of what we would have, we'd been seeing a lot of familiar names on the defensive line in the spring game, and also been like, oh,
Yeah.
we're running it back.
Man, it seems like Chris Turner is a guy that's been playing for Mizzou for 10 years, and he was kind of a guy that was a low-rated recruit that I thought was going to come in and like blow past his, recruiting rankings, and he really just kind of hasn't. He's kind of just been there, but because of the conditions of the the defensive line not being great the last few years, he's had a great opportunity to play a lot, but he's just kind of been there. And I'd like to see him break out and really make a difference this year, because again, the opportunity's there. He's probably going to be the guy on the line, but hasn't really brought much to the table in the last few years. So, and again, I mean, we'll mention this a lot, that this is a totally new coaching staff, and so everybody's starting from ground zero. There's no, well, this guy, he's experienced and we got through a lot together, so he's going to play more. There's just, everybody's at ground zero with this coaching staff, and so everyone has to earn their spot. And it'll be really interesting to, just because a guy played last year doesn't mean he's going to play this year.
Right. Some kind of specific, interesting questions I wanted to have you ponder. We kind of touched on this a little bit when we talked about Elijah Young burning the red shirt, but is there any freshman that you think could make an immediate impact that we would have, that would have really sparked our interest in the spring game? Is there anybody that you think is a good candidate to contribute as a freshman that we would have kind of been reminded about in the spring game?
Put me on the spot here.
Maybe I'll give you some options since I'm looking at names right in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
At wide receiver, maybe like a Jay Macklin. On the defensive side of the ball,
well, obviously Ennis Rakestraw comes to mind,
Mm-hmm.
but actually no, he wouldn't have been on campus. So because
True.
he was not a spring enrollee. So are you talking about guys who just came in the spring and have been on campus for like a month or two, kind of like Brady Cook or and Elijah Young?
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, we already talked about this, like you said, but I really do think Elijah Young is probably the best player that has the chance to make the biggest impact of those spring enrollees.
Well,
and there's not very many of them.
And you actually mentioned something that I hadn't thought about. I was just purely talking about him as a running back, and that's special teams.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely think he could carve out a role there and be meaningful enough to lose the red shirt through special teams.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, and one thing that adds to my thinking there is Coach Drinkwitz saying that he's going to invest a lot of time and energy into making sure the special teams is on point, which is something that is music to our ears because it's been a deficiency with Mizzou football for pretty much all of Barry Odom's tenure.
That's a nice way to put it.
Yeah. Sometimes it makes us pull our hair out while watching games.
I've never realized that punting is such an important facet of the game.
Yeah.
Until recently.
Yeah, just like retaining possession when the other team is attempting to give it to you.
Mm-hmm.
That's like really important.
You remember the bowl game against Texas a few years ago, and they had like the greatest punter in the world?
Yeah.
Like, okay, I don't want to even go down that road, but that was the greatest.
Like the best
punting.
punter in the NFL right now.
Yeah, he plays for Seattle, I think,
Yeah.
right?
Oof.
I've never been so impressed by a punter.
Yeah, that was so painful to watch because you're just like, is this really happening as a punter?
He's pinning us in the side of the 10 every time. Yeah.
Gosh, he would win gold medal on coffin corner kick every single time.
Seriously.
I got another question for you.
Let's hear it.
I kind of thought that we would see another decent outing from Barrett Bannister, and I'm going to predict that we saw that from him in the spring game, and then he would carry that into the regular season and have a regular season that kind of matched his output in the spring game. Is there anybody like that you think if they did perform well in the spring game, you could count on them backing that up in the regular season?
Yeah, I think a name that kind of comes to mind is Dominic Jacinto. I think he's a guy who is very physically capable of getting out there and really making defenses uncomfortable because he's very fast. He has really good hands. He's made some plays in the past, but I think he's pretty young, so he might be a junior this year. But I think he is definitely a wide receiver that comes to mind as a guy that we might hear from a little bit more than we have in the past.
Yeah, I think he had a 30-yard reception right at the beginning of the spring game last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I do remember him making a big touchdown play last year.
But then, yeah, I mean, he had some big plays in the regular season, but maybe, was overshadowed a little bit by some other players at receiver.
Mm-hmm. Just the receiver room was just a little bit of a revolving door last year. Just never could really find a player that was consistent. Had a lot of drops last year.
Yeah, I mean, I just wrote down some names. I mean, the guys returning that have every opportunity to just be outstanding players: Jalen Knox, C.J. Boone, Dominic Jacinto, Kamari Thompson, Maurice Massey. That could be...
All those guys have the potential to be really good, and I mean specifically Maurice Massey. He's just an athletic freak,
Mm-hmm.
And he can do so many crazy things. And Jalen Knox has kind of shown that at times he can really be one of the most reliable offensive players out there. He's super balanced player, good hands, good speed.
And still just a junior.
Yeah, but at times, sometimes he would kind of just disappear and get shut down a little bit because he would sometimes draw the best corner on the other team. But I think with age and experience, I think Jalen Knox could end up being kind of the prominent guy in the room.
Man, it would have been fun to have a spring game actually happen.
Yeah,
I can visualize some of these plays.
It's just fun to talk about football again. I know it's just. I mean, especially with everything going on, just with not a lot of sports going on, it's so fun just to think about actually watching real sports and just this happens to me every year. I start getting excited about football around this time of year, and I'm like, kind of feels close, but we're still like several months away.
Yeah.
And so, spring game's always fun just to kind of get a little snapshot into the team. In the middle of the off season, and this year definitely would have brought some different things that we could have looked forward to with a new coaching staff.
Yeah, and just hearing from the coaches and just getting some reports,
some interviews, or
some reports from practices. Just not getting any of that is so bizarre.
Yeah,
it just feels like we're so disconnected from the football team because it's been so long since we've had any meaningful insight into what's going on over there.
Yeah, it's like the only thing that we're hearing is about recruiting, which is going very well.
Yeah.
But we don't know anything about the actual team, the actual guys on the team right now that are going to play in 3 months for Missouri. We know nothing about them or what it's going to look like. And the other thing that we forgot to mention was the kickers. We've got 3 or 4 freshman kickers on the roster. We have no idea who's going to, that's a very important role on the team. With losing Tucker McCann, he certainly had his ups and downs at Missouri, but I think we have a pretty highly rated freshman coming in, Harrison Mevis.
Yep.
And then a couple of backups, but I would assume that Mevis is going to start, but I don't know.
Yeah, we could be in line for another 4-year starter at the kicker spot. Sean Keating actually attempted a kick or two in the spring game last year. He's a redshirt junior, but he missed. I think it was like a 28-yarder or something. So
typically I feel like kickers just come in and play all 4 years. You kind of just throw them into the fire in their freshman year and just create some kind of continuity there. And with a highly rated guy coming in, I would think that he's just kind of the guy for the next 4 years if he wants to be. I don't know why you have so many kickers on the roster. Honestly, I don't know why you have 4 kickers on the roster especially in this time when Missouri's in a potential scholarship reduction phase.
Tucker McCann punted last year too, right?
At times, yeah.
So there's a redshirt sophomore punter on the roster named Josh Dodge.
Okay, yeah, I'm familiar with him.
So, yeah, I mean...
He will probably be the punter, I would assume, yeah.
But then there's...
I'm not advocating for people losing their scholarships or anything, but I don't want to but at the same time, it just seems interesting why you'd have so many scholarships taken up with specialists who will never play.
Yeah, redshirt freshman Aaron Rodriguez listed as kicker. Redshirt freshman Logan Brock listed as kicker from Springfield Catholic.
Beautiful Springfield, Missouri.
Harrison Mevis, freshman, listed as kicker. And then Sean Keating listed as place kicker.
Oh. What? Field goals aren't his thing, but he can really kick it far.
We might have a situation where we have one guy doing the punting, one guy doing the kickoffs, and a third doing the field goals.
I think we have multiple long snappers on the roster too.
Well, we know who's going to win that job.
Absolutely.
Our buddy, you know.
Absolutely.
Special teams are very important, though.
Yeah, they are.
I actually would have been really interested to see who would be returning punts. If they would even punt in the spring game, I don't even know. It seemed like at Appalachian State, they were kind of like lining up in sort of like the general area of the red zone, the beginning of the red zone, and just starting the offense from there. But then I also saw a 60-yard touchdown, so maybe they were just moving the line of scrimmage around all game.
I think with Missouri's spring games, they typically will do everything. Like the offense will hike the ball, and then the punter will kick it, and then there'll be a returner that just catches it.
Yeah.
And that's all that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that'll be something that is going to be a mystery now, right up until the season starts, because no Jonathan Johnson, no Rashad Floyd.
So much mystery.
Yeah, it literally could be anybody.
Yeah, that's truly like one of the things about the spring game, that we find all this stuff. We find out a lot of this stuff, but it is just going to be a mystery for really up until fall camp or even game day. We will not know a lot of this stuff until then. So
we missed out on seeing Cade Musser return punts. I bet that's who would have done it.
Oh, yeah, you're probably right.
We'll never know.
Football's back, folks.
Yeah. It was a fun spring game. Looking forward to the season. Glad we could break it down for everybody. Were there any big plays that you liked that we didn't talk about? Let us know. Man, it's kind of sad.
It is. It is. But football will hopefully be back. Are you still going to be as excited about football as normal? Like, what is your reaction if they say no fans?
Sad.
Sad.
But I still have a TV. We still have SEC Network. We can make it work.
Yeah.
With
the way everything has been going, I think in some of the statements that have been made, football is going to happen. Like I think that it's pretty apparent that they will make at least college football happen in some capacity, no matter what. And even if there
will be plenty of people potentially upset about that,
and even if there's another spike in coronavirus, or even if they don't play the full season, there will be games played. Even if there's no fans, something will happen, and there will be money generated somehow, because they can't afford to go without it. Yeah. And ultimately, that's truly what everybody cares about. It seems like is will money be generated?
Yeah.
So that's what probably will need to happen in some way in the fall. So it could be a really weird season. But I just am excited to see some kind of like competition on my television.
Yeah, absolutely. I said earlier before we started before we started recording, I would sacrifice whatever remains of the NBA season, NHL season, MLB season. I would sacrifice those in a heartbeat to guarantee college football happens as scheduled.
I agree. I would love to have baseball or NBA playoffs on my TV right now. I would watch it and I would enjoy it. But apparently I'm going through puberty again, and but I agree with you. I ultimately just want football to be here and be on time and to be played. So I agree with you.
Yep. Well, we're in agreement.
Cool. Like normal.
Yep.
All right, everybody. You can find this on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts. We're on Twitter and YouTube at Mizzou Sports. I messed that up. Mizzou, and I messed that up too. Twitter and Instagram at Mizzou Sports Pod, and we're on YouTube. And you can email us at MissouriSportsPod@gmail.com.
And wherever you're listening, please give us a rating, a review, subscribe, comment. We'll interact with you any way we can, because we're that accessible. And thank you everyone for listening. We will see you next week.
After a long week of recruiting.
Yep.